I have to say, the gym photo with your dog, easily one of the best guest pics we've received so far.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. He comes to the gym every morning with me.
Fantastic. But beyond dogs and deadlifts at the gym, what you do at Think Beyond, helping sport reconnect with its purpose, that's something we don't talk about enough here on the show, especially in a space full of climate claims, community slogans, and lots of big promises. I think we're going to overdue for a real conversation.
Look forward to it.
The following is a conversation with Radha Balani, a global strategist and partner at Think Beyond. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bansala. Today, we explore how sport serves as a force for purpose, performance, and honest progress, and why storytelling might be our most overlooked tool for change. To support our show, please check the episode show notes. Radha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So you work at the crossroad of sports, purpose, and business alongside some of the most iconic names in global sports. But the work itself, it's rarely as polished or straightforward as headlines makes it seem. So let's start by going back a bit. Was there a moment when you realized that sport could be about much more than just results and revenue?
I'm not sure that I think I always knew it inherently, because in some way, shape or form, it was doing that for me in my life. So it was already making a difference in my life. It was giving me a safe space. And I grew up in a family where being of service is a part of our culture. And so I was always in some way, shape or form using sport to do something more than just win games, whether it was doing that for me or whether it was doing that for when I was coaching someone else, having the opportunity to chat to a kid who wouldn't talk to anyone else unless we were throwing a ball back and forth. I think when the revenue bit came into it for me was definitely later down the line. And I think really it was when I cared more about hearing the stuff that was happening off the field than on the field sometimes. I suppose that's sort of the moment. And if I cared about that and that made me feel differently about a team, a club, a brand, I always thought it was interesting. One of the things that I probably didn't realise and only know in retrospect is, I've been around for a little bit, if I'm being honest. I'm 44 years old, right? And growing up, playing sports, seeing what had been advertised, the impact of seeing someone with the same colour skin as me, it made such a difference to me. It made such a difference.
Right.
What also made such a difference is when I saw a woman playing something. I watched the England v Australia game yesterday streaming on my laptop, right? When I was young, the most women's football I ever saw on television was a 30-minute review of the Women's FA Cup final on one of our 4 channels in the UK that we had at the time, and that was 30 minutes. And I recorded that on an old-fashioned videotape and watched it over and over and over again. So the fact that something like that can make such a difference and can be extrapolated all the way out to where we are now, I think is meaningful. But I think that's just a small layer of it. I think there's so much more underneath that allows sport to be a driving force for change, for revenue, for impact.
Sport is the world's loudest storyteller. Can you unpack that for us?
Sure thing. So let's start with stories, right? Stories are great for many reasons. They allow us to speak in metaphor and talk about things that are difficult. They allow us to feel things emotionally. They tell us when we're younger that people have inner lives that we didn't have any idea about, and that's normal. They give us respite. They entertain us. They teach us, right? So if stories can do all of that, we should use as many different types of content to tell those stories. When it comes to sport, though, it's worth unpacking, well, why sport, right? So if we start with why sport, sport has 4 properties, in my opinion, right? Its first one is its inherent properties. Inherently, you move, moving is good. Moving makes us feel better mentally and physically. It can do all of those well-worn things that people talk about. You learn how to be in a team, you learn how to lead, you learn how to fail, you learn how to communicate. Sport is also about connection, and it's also about enjoyment. But like fire is inherently able to burn things and warm things and bring people together. It can also destroy them. In the same way, sport can also be destructive. So it has some inherent pieces, and sport inherently has an element of joy to it, or in some way makes something emotional happen in us for whatever reason. So it has some inherent characteristics. They can be and they can be good, and they can be bad, and they are both. So then that brings us to, well, when is fire good? Fire is good when we use it with intention to achieve something else, right? And that is also true of sport. So sport's other second property is that when used with intention, it can do a myriad things. So we can manipulate the rules, the spaces, the people coming into the spaces, the environment that it's in, the people that coach, the language that we use. We can manipulate the rules of the game to teach other things. So as an example, there's an amazing organisation called Kick for Life that's based in Lesotho in Southern Africa. They use the properties of football and play and sport to teach HIV prevention and AIDS prevention, and how to use and why to use antiviral drugs in a very small landlocked country where HIV and AIDS were rife and there was fear around the medication for it. But we can also use it to teach young people in Cambodia how to stay safe from remnants of war, like landmines that are also there. We can also use it to help people experience what inclusion feels like and what exclusion feels like, so that we start to change what they believe, what they know of themselves, and their own behaviours as a result of that. And it can do so many more things. The third bit is its institutional property. Mid-market rates of how valuable the sports industry are around $500 to $600 billion, right? That is a massive industry.
It is.
If that industry was run better across the board, if it was more sustainable, if it was more impactful, i.e. if it was more purposeful, that would be a significant shift. And then finally, sort of the cherry on the top, is its influence. So MIT do a social influence study, and 50 years ago, a bit more, people were mainly influenced by politicians at around 20%. Sport was about 5%. Now, sport's at 50%, and politicians are down in the single figures, which is clearly not a surprise, right? But that platform to truly deliver stories, messages of positivity, of inspiration, of information, that is why. But they only work, those stories, that tip of the iceberg only works if they're true and credible and authentic, and it's the right storyteller.
And on that, Radha, and on that exactly, why do you think stories connect with fans and supporters in ways that facts don't?
Emotion and meaning. We need something to identify with. It is, the human condition is not to be separate. The human condition is to feel part of. And so to feel connected to DeMar DeRozan, who spoke about his mental health, to feel connected to Colin Kaepernick, who spoke of the discrimination against him, of Azim Rafiq, who was horribly racially abused in the cricket system in the UK, to feel that connection, but also in the positive side of it, how much joy they get from this, and why it's fun, and why they choose to do things, and how much they love volunteering, or whatever it is. The storytelling has to have a meaningful storyteller, right? It has to have something that you care about that speaks to you in a way you can hear. You and I could read the same thing, and I will feel and experience something different to you, right? And that's partly about what I bring to it and who's telling the story. So the idea is that there isn't one way to do this. Many storytellers telling the stories in their own different ways allows us to connect with more and more people.
Mm-hmm. And how do you help your clients within your organization, translate their purpose into something real and operational?
So first and foremost, helping them understand what their purpose is. So if we think about purposes, why do we exist, right? Why does this business exist? What does it want to achieve? What is its reason for being? In order to do that, in order to have that North Star, we then start with really talking to them about what do they believe, what do they care about, what's relevant to what they do. If you're working with a technology company, STEM is probably quite an interesting and important thing for them, right? Mm-hmm. Innovation is exciting and important. So making sure that your purpose is aligned to and makes sense to what you do. And that's true of an individual as it is a company. But it's only meaningful if you can identify what it looks like in practice and how you go about doing it. And so our job is to go in like any strategist, but we just do it differently because sport is different, frankly, as an entity. It has nuances, it has history, it has heritage, it has millions of different types of owners, and it has its biggest asset is its people in a way that is is only compared to the entertainment industry because it's both, they are the product as much as they are the asset, right? And the person doing it. So it's our job is to put together a roadmap that helps them truly buy into what they want to achieve because they've been involved from the beginning, right? We're going in and helping them uncover what they care about and crucially why they care about it. What does it mean to them individually? What does it mean to them for the business? What does it mean for results? And why is it important? Why is it important, that particular social issue? Why is it important to your employees? Why is it important to the communities, to your stakeholders, to your customers? And then, well, how are you doing against it? What are you doing? And what could you do? What would unlock some of that purpose? And then how do you do it? And for me, purpose is only real when you're living it. And, putting together implementation plans, you can have 1 million of them, but actually implementing plans requires leadership within an organization, not just leadership buy-in, but leadership. Not just saying, yeah, I'm into this. It's, I need this, I want this. And why do I want it? Because I know that I can do better as a business and do good for the world.
Yeah. And Radha, what's a common mistake organizations make when they say they are purpose-driven?
The main one is really not being able to identify what that means in the actions that they take and in the strategies that they have and in the initiatives that they might do. And being able to understand how that purpose translates in, your business as usual, as well as how that translates into anything sort of particularly special you might do or something that is a different project. But how you show up every single day, people don't necessarily understand what that means and how it comes to life for employees, for consumers, for clients, for communities.
Is there a difference between a values-led brand and a values-led culture?
You could argue it's semantics. But there's probably something in the middle of that, which is a values-led brand is how the brand behaves. A values-led culture is how the people that represent the brand behave. And I think there is something different there. I don't know how important the distinction is, but yeah.
Let's talk about sustainability and we've been talking about this topic during our intro chat. There is a flood of talk around net zero, carbon offsets, ESG. What's real and what's performance?
The stuff that is real is the stuff that you can measure. And you can measure this stuff. That's the point. But it's also the plan. One of the biggest things that we see is that people don't want to talk about this until it's done. And this work is never done. All we can do is continue to make incremental progress, continue to make positive change. But sport is about competition and winning, right? So it's hard for people to say, we've started here. Here's where we want to go, but we're only here. This is difficult. This isn't. So I think the difference is when people only talk about the target, not about what they're doing and the actions they're taking and where they are in the journey towards that target. I think that's where performance, when things are performative, and that people are prepared, to put out a credible impact report, for example, that can be a super exciting bit of content that's great to showcase partners, that's going to drive revenue, that's going to drive interest, that's going to drive behaviour change. So the difference is it's performative when you can't tell the story of how you get there, whether you're there or not.
Yeah. And is it an easy task to guide clients, let's say in regards to balancing ambition and authenticity?
No, I think the journey to ambition is authenticity. So there's never really the need to balance it, right? I think that there are things that allow us to embed authenticity in some way, shape or form, like international frameworks, ISO 2012-1, for example, that is externally verified, and someone can come in and that adds a layer of credibility to you, whether you're B Corp certified. They're pretty stringent, and you have to show what you're doing, and you can't sit on your laurels. You do need to keep your certifications, and that's why we think they're important. Not all organisations are ready for it. But if they're willing to use the framework, we're on the journey for them to start to move and get towards that level of knowing, here is how we are delivering sustainably.
And this topic in particular, sustainability, carbon offset, and, as a headline, for many people, many fans, many supporters, for them it's complicated. And somehow when you talk this issue, it's something that they don't see a reference point. They don't see something tangible, talking about offsetting, reducing carbon footprint and stuff like that. They said, okay, if we do it here in our place, there is no border, there is no barrier, but clean water, clean soil and clean air are just as urgent. Why are they overlooked?
So it's easier to quantify carbon, first and foremost. So it's easier to do that. And often people will just attribute to carbon. But you're absolutely right. If you do all of your work through the carbon lens, people are starting to call it carbon tunneling, you limit your impacts on the climate and the broader sustainability areas, but also you're also limiting your ability to embed justice across all of it, environmental and social justice. So it's about sort of co-benefits of soil, air, water, etc., etc. I think there's they aren't separate. They are ultimately connected, and that's sort of why we engage with people holistically across the sustainability spectrum. So that is everything. That's the full ES and the G. And on the E side of that, we try to underpin it with justice at all times. And we are looking at everything. We are looking at waste. We're looking at water. We're looking at soil. Sometimes the narrative is around the carbon, but when we are talking about sports, we are never not really talking about water and soil. Right? There are very few where that quality isn't part of the narrative, right?
Yes,
and so it is in there. I don't think that means things aren't being done. I just think it's harder to talk about because, to your point, it's really hard to talk about.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we try to do is make all of this come to life for people in a really meaningful way. And what does it mean for them and why should they care about it? And some of that is about saying, it might feel irrelevant in a city talking about carbon, talking about clean air. But if we really talk about it, we know that there's less tree cover. The air isn't being cleaned. There is greater incidence of asthma and other pulmonary related issues. Those people are equally less likely to have green space to participate in things, poorer mental health, and they are equally less likely to have access to the health supports that they need in order to manage any of this scenario, right? And so really helping people try and find a way to connect the dots between what's happening in the world and the impacts it has on them today. And, for some people, we need to be talking to them about the impacts it's going to have on their grandkids, because there's a lot of sort of generational stuff that some people just don't care about. But they do care when we start talking about what the world could look like or not look like in the future.
Yeah. Are any organizations you work with thinking more holistically about their environmental impact?
Yeah, absolutely. Liverpool Football Club is the best example that we have. They do it in so many ways, and that is across waste, across water, across nutrition. They've got allotments that they're building. I'm going to get you, I'm just going to pause for a second. Let me get some examples, because I want to give you some proper examples. Here we go. Yeah. So Liverpool Football Club is the best example. We are so proud to be working with them, and not a podcast or speech goes by where I don't mention them, or that I've been a fan since I was 4. So let me just get that out of the way and say that now. But Liverpool have started quietly. They started and they got their house in order, and they truly made this part of how they do business, led all the way from the top through to the casual part-time steward that works on match days around the Kop, okay? So they did this properly, they did it intentionally, and they've been doing lots of different pieces. They've been rewilding parts of the training centre, planting orchards to create quiet spaces for staff and players. They've developed 2 allotments, and the food that is grown is given both locally and used in the players' cafe and in their nutrition. They help staff access nature and the local community access it. They, from a water perspective, they take their water for irrigation at the training centre and at the academy from boreholes, minimising that consumption of mains-related water. And World Athletics is another good example. They've got commitments and targets around air quality, as well as education to athletes and advocacy for good air going forward.
Yeah. Let's talk about Think Beyond. Walk us through, Radha, a typical engagement. What's your first step with a club or a league or a team?
Sure. Let me just give a little bit of context on Think Beyond, because there are sort of 2 primary strands to our work that are connected. So Think Beyond is a global sports, business, entertainment consultancy. Our reason for being is to make sports, entertainment and brands more sustainable, more impactful, and as a result of that, more valuable. And that spans the most technical pieces of sustainability work from our incredible team that are going in and identifying scope 1, 2 and 3 boundaries, identifying where people's baselines are, going through and working out how they are operating and how they can operate better. How can we help them do that in a more sustainable way that is relevant? So we use a double materiality, and we identify the impact they are having on external issues and the external issues that have an impact on them, to identify the sweet spot of where they are best placed to make a positive impact. But all the way on the other side of that is so that's sort of sustainable organisations and how you do that. But we also work with a bunch of brands to develop impactful programs that truly make a difference in the world, aligned with a brand's purpose and vision and hopefully product, right? So if you think about Rexona, one of the Unilever brands, they're deodorant brands.
Yeah.
People need more deodorant if they sweat. People sweat if they move more. We know that there are significant swathes of the population that do not move. When we look at who they are and why they're not moving, invariably it is young, disadvantaged people from the LGBTQ community, women and girls, and communities of colour. What are the barriers and what can we do to help? So we would create a programme that is now being delivered in 13 countries worldwide, supported by Rexona, delivering on their purpose to make movement, help people build confidence to move and get confidence from movement. It's also a very simple business play, and it aligns to their sports sponsorships, right? So we do work like that as well. We try to bridge the two by helping rights holders that we're going and doing sustainability strategies for, trying to help them identify how those strategies make them much more valuable to a brand, so they can build purpose-led partnerships with their sponsors versus transactional ones. Those partnerships are deeper, they're more meaningful, they're stickier, and they truly create change. They are the true definition of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. And then the final bit that we do is the inspiring communications and the storytelling that comes off the top of that. So that's the widest context. What do we do when we go in and it's a sustainability strategy? It truly is really understanding where the desire is coming from first and foremost, having really human conversations. A lot of organisations come and start this journey because they're managing risk. The best organisations come in seeing an opportunity. You know, it's like going into a tackle trying not to get hurt versus going into a tackle to try and win. You're always going to get hurt when you don't get hurt, when you don't go in to win a tackle, right? I've learned that through experience. And so really understanding where our clients are emotionally, what is driving this, what is that leadership view of it, who cares about it, and who are our allies. And then it's about, you know, discovery work about the organisation, what they do, how their behaviours affect the environment, how their events affect the environment, and the opportunities they have to do things better. That might be through workshops, through stakeholder interviews. It will always be about also setting ambitions. What do they most care about and why? And then doing a double materiality analysis of it to identify the places where they need to mainly make a difference, putting a strategy together that within it has waste, water, carbon, health and well-being, equity, justice, the entire swathe, so the full ES&G.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And on that, talking about your clients, usually when they come in, they come with the right questions, or do you have to reframe the entire approach and maybe the entire value proposition?
It's both. Some people come to us who have been doing this for 17 years and are doing a really good job, but they haven't had a refresh in 17 years and they're wondering if they're doing the right thing because the world's changed. Some people come to us on day one because someone has said, you need a sustainability strategy, and if you don't have one, you're not going to be able to do or get X, Y, and Z. And some people start there, right? For some people, it is a moment where they go, oh my God, I had never thought about this. How are we not doing this? You know, I think there's less of those people now, but people often are starting because they know they need to and they're not sure how. And then others who are already on the journey know and see the value it's driving and want to do more and do better.
And usually when they come to you, what's the trigger exactly?
For them to come to us?
Yeah.
I think it's that beautiful mix of there never being one answer, sadly. But it can be stakeholder and board pressure. It can be risk of losing business. It can be true, genuine care of leadership. It can be that someone junior has been banging the drum and has been doing this, and suddenly they're showing value and they're getting feedback from clients, consumers, peers saying, oh my God, I didn't realize you did that. Oh, that's amazing. That's made me decide to stay with you instead of going somewhere else. Whatever it happens to be. Sometimes it's that internal pressure that bubbles up, you know, and it can be from an intern that comes in. I've seen that happen where an intern has been banging the drum and suddenly management is starting to listen. Sometimes it's legislation drives it, requirements drive it, whatever drives it. I'm mainly interested in getting people in the door.
Or
that's all I really care about, because once they're in, I can have a real conversation with them to truly understand what their drivers now are, how can I make them more optimistic drivers, and are they in this for real? Because if they're not, I'll show them back out the door. I'm not interested in sport washing, greenwashing. They're not going to do it for real. If it's just for PR, I truly, it doesn't matter how big the business, I'd rather not have it.
Or maybe pressure from their sponsors and partners.
Yeah, I think that's also true. And I think what we're starting to see, not what we've been seeing for the past few years, is a shift to where the brands, the sponsors, the partners are asking questions of the rights holders. Before, it was rights holders asking brands, can you help us with our equity, our environmental stuff? Now it's very much the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. There is still this myth that purpose is a soft play. Can purpose drive real performance?
Yeah, and it does. It absolutely does. And there's plenty of data out there that helps us evidence that story, right? Much like everything, it's how you do it. You know, if you're doing sort of old school behavior, it absolutely doesn't. And I suppose what do I mean by that? I like to see things on this sort of journey, this spectrum from philanthropy to shared value. So if we think about philanthropy at its heart being about generosity, right? At its heart, philanthropy is about generosity. It's giving something and there's no real expectation of return. There's no impact required and expected of. In general, it's being done without a definite return. And it will always be there, and there will always be a space for it, and there always should be a space for it. We then slightly start to move and we end up in the realm of corporate social responsibility, which is sort of old language. And corporate social responsibility is about responsibility and obligation, you know, and therefore it was never really done in a way that gave it the stickiness that it needed to be something that when things get tough, it isn't the first thing to get sort of taken off the list. And it's always the thing that's stuck in one corner of an organisation. It's not really part of it. It's not doing anything. It's pure obligation. So when the shit hits the fan, excuse my language, what's an easy thing to get rid of? It's that one. And then that moves us to this era we're in now of shared value. Shared value isn't my term, it's Michael Porter, Harvard Business School, right? But shared value, we're doing this type of work where purpose-led, impactful, societal, environmental, however you want to term it, work is a business necessity. When it is a business necessity, that is when it's driving revenue. When it is no longer a cost line, it's driving value, it's driving revenue. And I think, so what are we seeing? Deloitte put some data out that said purpose-oriented companies are 66% more likely to be profitable and 63% more likely to outperform their peers in their stock price performance. Companies that align their business practices with corporate purposes significantly outperform their peers, 25% higher revenue, 22% higher pre-tax profit, right? There's loads more, but there's the other side of it as well, which is the Sport Industry Group do a report every year, the Sport Industry Annual Report. The next one is out in January. 72% of fans would pay more for tickets if there's a positive environmental benefit. That is absolutely a business imperative to do something. And 69% of 16 to 24-year-olds expect sport to improve communities, reduce inequality, and act sustainably. And there's a plethora of other data that is also saying, if they don't do this, sometimes it's about keeping your revenue, right? Because you're not going to lose consumers because they're like, well, I don't like your practices, I'm going elsewhere. Or it's not even, I don't like your practices, I'm going elsewhere. It's more, I didn't know that other brand Z is doing X, Y, and Z. That's awesome, I care about that. I'm going to use them.
Yeah, clear. And thanks for sharing the data. The takeaway from what you said is when purpose is involved, it doesn't matter if you are a right holder or a sponsor or a club or any organization. Basically, it drives the ROI and revenue up.
Yeah, you get return on objective, you get return on investment. Often you get social return on investment as well, which is always great to quantify when you're talking to governments and big sporting entities around the impact that they can have on society over time.
Yeah. Why does the sports industry, and it's one of the fastest growing industry in the world, struggle with honesty when it comes to hard topics like climate or inequality or community, which we don't talk about? We talk about fans, we talk about supporters, but then we hardly talk about community.
So I just think there isn't a national or global narrative on community. There are hyper-local narratives on community all the time. I've not worked with a sports entity that isn't deeply committed to the communities where they live, work and play. They just don't always talk about it. So I think it's less about honesty. They're not scared to be honest. They're scared to speak at all sometimes.
Right.
I think that has only gotten worse in the current geopolitical status that we're in, and it's a real shame because free speech isn't safe speech anymore, and there's a level of pragmatism that we need to get on with. But there's also some fear around, like I said earlier, people don't want to tell people we're starting on something, we haven't achieved it. They want to tell the story after the fact, right? And that isn't how this work happens, right? That isn't how this work happens.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's a fear of honesty from those that are doing the good work. It's just a mindset shift of the confidence to show credibility by talking about the work, even when it's not done, by holding yourself to an account. And I think that all of our clients have been brave enough to go on that journey. And the reason they've been brave enough to go on that journey is that they are sure they are doing the work and it's going to make a difference. It's not going to be perfect,
Absolutely.
But they know they're telling the truth.
Yeah. And on that, talking about mindset or mindset shift, let's use as an example when it comes to inequality. I've been talking about this topic for 2.5 years. We started our discussion talking about and your experience basically when you watched the Women FA Cup. I'm not sure when was that, but until today, when we talk about equal pay, for example, it's some sort of, no one wants to hear about it. It's some sort of taboo. And thanks to, just to recall for our listeners, the U.S. national soccer team, I believe they are the first one where they had to fight for equal pay, and they got there, And I still don't understand, even here in Europe, even here in Sweden, why this topic is taboo. And knowing that you were talking earlier about your experience watching that FA women football match. I wanted to ask you about the grandstand. Was the stadium full or just?
Such a great question. It was held at Oxford United Stadium, and it was absolutely half empty.
Here we go. But now we see a difference, a big shift. Which is amazing. Sponsors, they love it. There is more revenue. There is more partnership. The major streaming platforms pushing for more, But still, when it comes to equal pay, it's like, oh no, we don't want to hear that topic anymore.
So I think that there's a number of reasons for that. The first one is the people that are shutting down the conversations are the ones that feel as though they have the most to lose, that they will lose power. And that is just true of society. It is true of, forgive me, the white, male, middle-class diaspora from Western nations, first and foremost. Let's just be honest. They still control the world. And so first and foremost, why would they talk about it? Because they see it as a zero-sum game, whereas I don't. I don't see there being a finite amount available, right? And then the other reason that it happens is it's because it's discussed through the lens of equality and not through the lens of equity. So you discuss it through the lens of equality and people say, well, it can't be equal because women's football hasn't got as many people watching it, hasn't got as many sponsors, it hasn't got the size of X, Y, and Z, it hasn't got X, Y, and Z. Same conversation that's happening here in New York, in the US, with the WNBA. Yeah. That does not take into account the starting point of these leagues. If we think about women's soccer in the UK, it was banned for 50 years. We're still catching up.
Yeah.
So when equity helps us create an element of fairness based on circumstances, then we're in a position where the conversation is much more meaningful. But you talk about it from an equity perspective, and the first person is going to say, you don't make as much revenue, we're not paying you as much, you're not as good. It just doesn't take into account the full story. And it doesn't take that into account because people are scared that their power and control is going to go. And that's just sadly true of life, But you have people like Billie Jean King, Serena Williams, the 99ers soccer team that you mentioned, Nafisa Collins over here. Just people are making sure people understand, that Cooper Flagg, first pick in the draft in the NBA this year, in his first game, he will make more money than a seasoned WNBA player will make in the season.
Yeah.
In one game.
Yeah.
And so how can we hope to to find some balance in the world if we're saying, okay, it can be equal and you can have proportionately the same amount of us based on where you are now, versus we've been pushing you down so long, let's help create a sense of parity to start with and then go from there. And listen, that sounds idealistic, and perhaps it is, but I think it's worth
the
conversation.
Radha?
What's the solution? I don't know that there is one. I think
because
some
look,
of it is...
the example of the US soccer been fighting, and they had to basically boycott a couple of games, I believe. And finally, through their governing body in the US, where you are, it went through. Now, do other teams or sport or individual athletes, women athletes, do they have to follow suit or do the same? Or
you would hope they don't, is the answer. What I know is that the 99ers, they were inspired and took guidance from Billie Jean King and those women that locked themselves in the room and threatened not to play the US Open in order to get some prize money. And almost 50 years later, less than 50 years later, they're again, trying to do the same thing, and they did it. It is increasingly distressing to think that that is the only way to do this. And part of that speaks to who's leading our sports, how equitable is that leadership, and who's prepared, which investors, private equity or otherwise, which sponsors are prepared to be really brave and say, I see an inequality. I think that we can make a difference in it. And the commensurate difference means the quality of the product is going to increase as well. Because that's equally important, right? The quality of the product is important. So as an example, when women's soccer in the UK first became semi-professional, that was a revelation. It meant that some of these women weren't working 4 or 5 jobs in order to be able to play. They were having to pay to play for the England team. As they started to be able to be given full salaries, suddenly they're training full time and the performance on the field goes through the roof a bit. And then the ancillary support gets put around them: physios, psychotherapists, psychologists, nutrition, goalkeeping coaches. Specific goalkeeping coaches in women's soccer came in quite late, which is why the product wasn't great for a long time as well, because the keeping was one of the less strong parts of the game that we were seeing when it was on TV. And so, people are sort of saying, well, it's kind of boring because of that, or these big scores aren't worth it. So slowly and surely, when we invest more, the product gets better, right? The product gets better, there's more interest in it, there's more eyes on it. I think the problem is that people seek one solution. There isn't one solution. And then the other thing that I think is a really interesting thing that's come up is this isn't the same product. We're not trying to recreate women's sport in the image of men's sport. The Sport Industry Report asked a question about that around women's sport using the same governance and structures as men. And there was pure indecision. It was pretty much a 50-50 split. People really don't really know which way to go. And so allowing women's sport to be, it's sort of a balance of allowing women's sport to have its own style of product and to be paid fairly for that product, recognising where equity and justice come into that question of fairness, not just equality.
Yeah. Still, I'm wrestling with this issue since, like I said, since almost now 2.5 years, and there is no silver bullet to it. But since we're talking about organization purpose, and inequality is one, and we can talk about this issue for days, but then organization and purpose versus inequality within women's sport. Maybe one of the solutions that athletes need to speak up more. They need to be more, we need to see more advocate and to talk about this issue, because when athletes and management with their organization, when the purpose doesn't align, there is a problem.
Mm-hmm. So I think that those athletes who recognize that they have a platform for change and they authentically want to do it, and they have a support network around them that keeps them safe, then they should, because it's authentic and credible. But no one should be forcing anyone to use their platform unless they want to. You know, I think the majority of athletes that I speak to care and want to do something. Some of them don't know how. Some of them are worried that it will impact their performance, whereas I will always say, no, it helps you understand that you are more than a time. You are more than a distance you've jumped. You're more than your statistics. Doing this stuff makes you a whole person, so that when times are tough, you're not judging yourself and your worth by something that you can't always control. There are athletes that truly have meaningful reasons to care about things, and those that do speak out do a wonderful job. But the environment isn't always safe for them to do so. Colin Kaepernick is a great example of that. It wasn't safe for him to do so.
Yeah.
You know, as much as Jesse Owens was incredible and what he did was so important for the world as a whole.
Indeed.
He ended up performing circus stunts to try and make money.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's incumbent upon us to create an environment where people can speak out safely. But in the current geopolitical environment, it's pretty tough, which is why I think seeing collective groups of athletes do things together and speak about things is really important. Athletes of the World did a beautiful video for the Glasgow COP, I think it was, around climate change and the importance of it and a call to action. So, yes, I think athletes stepping up and showing up and advocating is important, but equally important is them showing up on match day, playing really well, and me having the opportunity to see it.
Right.
Women's sport showing up and doing a good job is always going to be social change, because without it, there's always an existential threat of women in women's sport. So you can't. I don't think there's a female athlete in this world that isn't doing social change, because just by the very nature of them participating at a level that they're participating, having eyes on them, having investment in them.
Yeah,
that,
you're right.
Because of how far we have to come and how far we have to go, it's
Yeah.
always social change.
Yeah.
The ones that are prepared to use their voice, I think they play an important role. I love supporting those athletes. I love working with those athletes and really helping them.
And we can see as well the positive impact that those athletes or teams like soccer, like the WNBA, and sometimes some controversies like Caitlin Clark versus Angela Reeves, the positive impact they have on the little girls, you know. And we see this, especially here in Europe and here in Sweden, I see so many little girls wants to play soccer and join a team and join. So that's really positive and encouraging as well.
It's really encouraging. I'll tell you a little anecdote. I have a 10-year-old goddaughter back in the UK.
Okay.
And one day at school, you have to go into school dressed up as what you want to be when you grow up. And she went in dressed up in the Liverpool kit that I'd bought her, because it didn't occur to her that it would be impossible for her to be a professional player. And she's 9 years old, 10 soon, right? That is testament. Like me, I could have gone in dressed up and I'd have had John Barnes on the back of my shirt. I could never have been a professional player in the men's game. And certainly there wasn't a women's game. So, you know, that's one of my favourite things to be able to share.
Yeah, lovely. Fantastic. Love it. What would you say, Radha, to a CEO or a GM trying to get it right today?
Yeah. Be strategic, be methodical, lead, allow the things to take time to take time, and identify your quick wins. Use external verification where you can for your own peace of mind, if nothing else. And don't do it all on your own. One of the things that makes stuff like this work is when it isn't a department. It is when sustainability is part of every department's job. So you might have a couple of people working in a sustainability team, but for this to truly work, individuals within different departments need to have KPIs for their job that include sustainability related targets, and that other sustainability related targets for the business. In the same way that we all might have a revenue target, even if I'm in accounting, my revenue target might actually be about cost saving for all I know, right? Everyone needs to have a role to play in this, and they need to be judged on that. So helping CEOs, GMs turn this into a horizontal, not a vertical, that allows them to drive revenue, save costs, engage with employees, engage with stakeholders, but be in it for the long run. Absolutely take the quick wins, but be in it for the long run, for the long-term value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I would say is think beyond, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing. What's one painful truth, or let's say inconvenient truth, the industry needs to hear?
That we can't sit on a moral high ground. Change is going to need to come from the inside, right? So, as an example, Live Golf, backed by the PIF in Saudi, really easy for people to turn around and say, don't work with them. Yeah. But if there's $100 million going to make a difference environmentally and socially and for communities, I know that our team at Think Beyond is the best in the world at doing that. And so if I know that, and I know that it's going to happen and they're going to do it for real, we can make change from the inside. What I can also say is, if at any point we didn't believe that they were doing this for real, the actual change is happening, the actual actions are being taken, the behaviours are changing, the outcomes are happening, the investment is happening on the ground. If at any point we don't believe that's true, we'll walk away. But if we start looking at where money flows from, no one has clean hands. There is no one in this world that has clean hands, really, Right. And so we can throw stones as much as we like, but at some point we have to work in the most difficult of places and the least equitable places sometimes in order to make change. I think there are red lines. I absolutely think there are red lines. And I think those red lines are for people to find on their own. This is something we debate a lot. But my principle of it is, if we can truly make change in a meaningful way that doesn't green or sport wash, then it's incumbent upon us to use the skills and experience in our business to do that. But it's also incumbent upon us to call it out when it's not happening.
You're listening to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk. For more conversations on sports leadership, faith, performance, and innovation from Sweden to the world, visit prezerosportstalk.com. Yeah. Good. Now it's time for our lightning round.
Sure.
Ready for speedy Q&A?
Always.
Let's do this. Place you go to recharge after a long day or a long week?
The gym, F45.
With the dog?
With the dog.
Of course.
Always.
Favorite book or podcast lately?
One of my favorite podcasts is called The Take, and it's a film podcast with Simon Mayo and Mark Kermode. It started as them doing film reviews when Simon Mayo was on Radio 1 in the late 1990s. It carried through all the way through, and it turned into a podcast that was on the BBC, and then they took it off and made their own channel. I've been listening to that podcast in its various iterations for 25, 30 years, since it started. These two men are a constant friend to me, and they make me laugh, they move me, we talk a bit about films, there's a subculture to it, but it feels like a little family that has been there through all the difficult stuff and all the good stuff in my life. So I highly recommend The Take.
Good. Nice. Most unexpected skill you've picked up?
Unexpected? I don't know. That's a great question. Most unexpected skill. Okay, let's come back to it.
Okay. Sport you secretly love but don't play?
I'm not sure how secret it is. I suppose I should say that I've had 6 knee operations and I'm not allowed to play any sport. But I find snooker weirdly compelling.
All right. Yeah. One value you'd never compromise on?
Kindness.
Love it. If not strategy, what career would you explore?
I would love to be a sports broadcaster.
Mm-hmm. Any particular sport? Or?
No, I am sport agnostic. I can watch any sport. I will talk about any sport. I will learn about any sport. I'm literally through and through.
There we go. How about Formula One?
Absolutely. I'll learn about it. It's not a passion point, but I certainly learn about it.
Good. If you have the opportunity to have a dinner with a historical figure, who will it be and why?
A historical figure. Jesse Owens, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so little, he was given so little opportunity to say anything, you know?
Yeah.
He did what he did and we saw, but no one really spoke to him about it, you know? And I think that's a conversation that I've never found any content about. It's always been about him, not from him.
Not from him, yeah. Coffee, tea, or something else?
So for a long time, about a third of my personality was coffee. Anytime anyone saw me, I had a coffee in my hand. I haven't had coffee for 2 years. So my drink of choice is Coke Zero.
All right. Okay. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm a morning person. My alarm goes off at 5:35 every morning and then I go to the gym.
Yeah, and walk the dog.
Exactly.
Yeah. And lastly, a piece of advice or wisdom to our listeners on any topic.
It's not about you. Really recognizing that 9 times out of 10, it's not about you. The way people speak to you, the way people treat you, how scenarios pan out, it's not about you. The more we understand that we can't take other people's behavior personally all the time, it's a reflection of them and not us, the greater freedom there is in our own minds. So, yeah.
Radha Balani, thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for speaking to me.
And to our listeners, to close up, here a quote that feels deeply tied to this conversation. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. We want to thank you for joining our show. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. While you're here, subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell. Visit prezerosportstalk.com to explore more conversations on sports, leadership, faith, performance, and innovation. From Sweden to the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Take care.